Hi, I'm Paige, and I host the podcast Reverie True Crime. I tell stories of the darkness, terrors, injustices, and sorrows from all around the world. From cases most of us have heard of, to the ones that maybe not everyone has. You can listen to Reverie True Crime wherever you stream your favorite podcasts. That's Reverie True Crime. Remember, stay safe, remain aware of your surroundings, and take care.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors.
Hey everyone, this is Alice, and I'm here with my co-host, Alice. As you can probably tell, I'm here today not with Brett, but it's exciting news. As I'm recording this, Brett and Mrs. Brett are actually on their way to the hospital to deliver their baby. So please send them good vibes, good thoughts. This is a little bit earlier than expected, but we'll keep you updated on how things go. But we are all very excited to meet the newest little prosecutee. Now, because of that, and you may be able to appreciate that we need to take a little bit of a break while Brett gets settled in with a new baby. So we're going to take a break for the next 2 weeks from our substantive episodes of cases. And don't worry, though, you're still going to hear plenty of our voices because we have some other surprise episodes for you these 2 weeks. So thank you for hanging with us. And here is a little plug. If you are a Patreon, and you can still go join right now at any level because we are terrible business people. We don't have different tiers for getting more things if you give more money. So you can give as little or as much as you'd like. And if you are a Patreon, you will already have access to our 3-parter. It is a very popular case. You guys have been requesting it for just about as long as we've been recording cases. So if you'd like some substantive episodes, they are there for you on our Patreon page. All you have to do is join, and we hope you do. But also this week, you'll hear something different, and we hope you enjoy it. So this week, you'll get to hear Brett's other passion. If you don't already know this, Brett is kind of a horror buff. He knows everything there is to know about horror movies, horror podcasts, books, anything, you name it. I can't handle it. I am much too much of a weenie. I can't watch horror movies. But recently, Brett joined Robin from We Saw the Devil and Dr. Jules from Riddle Me That to discuss the controversial French horror gem, Martyrs. Now, why is this film considered one of the most disturbing of all time? Listen on and you will find out.
Hi, I'm Jules from Riddle Me That.
Hey guys, this is Brett from Prosecutors Podcast.
Hi everyone, it's Robin from We Saw the Devil.
And today we're going to discuss Robin's favorite movie in the entire world, Martyrs.
Yay! Thank you for putting this together. I'm so excited. I will take any opportunity I can get.
Yeah, I'm excited too. This will be good. So we did our intro, but Robin, you're definitely going to lead this conversation because this is your area of expertise. For anyone listening, you probably don't know this, but Robin literally did her dissertation on martyrs. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Robin?
Sure. So my undergrad degree is in French language and literature, and I discovered Martyrs while I was doing a horror podcast. I actually podcasted before. I had a horror movie centric podcast. Came across Martyrs, which I would love to talk both Jules, you and Brad about how you first encountered the film. But I encountered it while I was in school, and I had to do my dissertation on it. Underlying themes, which I'm sure we'll get into on this episode, but it's so multi-layered. It's based in so much historical context as far as French history and different things. So yeah, I did a 31-page paper dissertation on Martyrs. So fun stuff there.
Yeah, that's super intense. But this is one of those movies I think you could literally just keep writing and writing, because you could dissect so much. And, depending on which perspective you're looking at it from, and you could look at it from a multitude of different perspectives, whether or not you are a religious person, whether or not you aren't, if you want to look at it as like an allegory on religion, you could certainly do that. There's just so many different, or colonialism. There's so many different things that you could look at it through the lens of. And I think all are kind of equally profound, but I think to reduce this movie to just like quote unquote horror porn is so reductive.
It is. And actually, I recommended the film after my dissertation. My professor was a 72-year-old woman from France, and she watched it and immediately she loved it. She was able to, I guess, intellectually identify different themes, living in France and whatnot. And she cried. She actually thought it was one of the most beautiful films she'd ever seen. So I agree. It actually hurts my soul when people reduce this film to quote torture porn. Like, it actually harms me as a person.
What do you think about that, Brett?
So you guys introduced me to the movie, number one. I had heard of it, but I had not seen it. I'm a fan of sort of the French take on horror movies. Inside or Irreversible, just a couple that jump out. I thought, number one, I think it felt like two movies to me. Like, they really felt like the second movie started about halfway through. But no, you compare it to sort of American torture porn, I think what people think of when they think of torture porn. And it was so, I really did think it was profound. I watched it for the first time last night, so I am brand new on this. And I just think of all those movies that came out in the early 2000s, mid 2000s that people categorize as torture porn, and this was not it. The distinguishing characteristic, I don't think, is language. I don't think it's the fact it's French. It's that everything that happened in the movie had a point and made sort of a deeper point. And I think you're right. I think there are so many themes in this movie. Like, there aren't a lot of themes in, some of the other movies in this that people might call torture porn, but there are lots of themes in this, lots of really deep thoughts. And I think it's a movie we could talk about for quite a while.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm with you, Robin. It hurts my soul when people say that this movie is just torture porn. It's like, if you come at it through a philosophical lens, or someone is a deep thinker, I think you can look at the beginning and you think this is just a typical revenge movie. You see, a young girl. I'm with you, Brett. I see two movies, right? And that's how I first saw it. Two almost distinct movies. One is this revenge thing. And then it's sort of like you see violence as revenge. And, as the viewer, we're watching it from this lens of, you can almost empathize. You see the fact that there's obviously been this deep trauma that Lucy's experienced. And you see this in kind of the like creature or whatever, the woman that kind of haunts her, the one that she couldn't get out when she left the facility or whatever, and she self-harms because of that. So you see her kill this family. You understand there's a reason for it, but you also have that underlying question of, did they do what she's accusing them of doing? And then as it moves further into the story, we see the, I think it's quoted to being like the creature, right? The woman that has the thing fused to her face, the metal thing. And you see this aftermath and the impact of this violence and this torture. So we're not seeing like torture for torture's sake. We're seeing like this awful impact, not only psychologically, but physically, as she gets into that bathtub. And you see all those cuts all over her body. And like, you know what it's like when you pour salt on a wound or something like that. And imagine getting in this hot bath with all of these wounds. You've got metal fused to your head, fused to your groin area. And then you see the aftermath later where, we actually do see the violence, but it's never for violence sake. It's always for this deep, profound reason. Sure, they're at the beginning, they're basically, it's forced upon her, but there is this kind of dichotomy of these others that came before who refused to surrender. And those who refused to surrender couldn't be martyrs and weren't given that forbidden knowledge. But once you surrender and you give yourself to the process, there is that level of consent. And then that is what separates Anna, I believe, from all of the others that came before her.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with you. And also to your point about torture, Pascal Laugier, the director, is just, in my mind, even though he's only had a few credits to his name, is one of the most brilliant authors, screenwriters, just directors like in the history of cinema. But he constantly has been assaulted and at film festivals and things like that of, people accuse him of making torture porn. And I read an interview with him, and one of the most profound things that he said is the film doesn't talk about torture, it talks about pain, which I think is very, very, very accurate. And I think a lot of people aren't able to see through some of the acts on screen in order to actually see what he was trying to arrive at.
Well, yeah, and I thought I'll call it the first movie. I'm going to continue to treat it as two different movies. The first movie was, as you guys were saying, sort of a brilliant treatment of trauma, because I think a lot of people who've never suffered trauma think, or they can't understand why people who are no longer in a traumatic situation can't get past it, right? So whether it's PTSD for soldiers or people who've been in abusive relationships or whatever, it's like, well, you're not there anymore. What's the big deal? Like, and this notion of how it haunts her and how she can't escape it, and this, using the first creature as the embodiment of her trauma, I just thought was great. And also the way trauma causes you to hurt people you love, because Anna obviously loves her, and yet there's a point where it seems like she may almost kill Anna at one point, and Anna can't understand her trauma either. Like, she, as much as she loves her and as much as she wants to, she can't understand what she's going through. She can't see what she sees. And I thought that was really great.
Yeah, I agree. I think the use of this woman that, she saw when she was obviously a young girl, I don't know how old she was supposed to be. The passage of time is used in an interesting way in this movie, because you're really unsure of how much time has passed at any one given interval. And it's kind of disorienting. And I think obviously Pascal Laugier does that on purpose. But the moment when she looks and she sees this woman screaming, and it's such like a visceral primal scream where it conveys like such pain. But at that moment, Lucy is helpless. She can't do anything except for save herself. And in that moment, when she chooses to save herself, she's forever, integrating that trauma of that woman as to be part of herself. And that will forever be carried with her and haunt her, because not only has she been re-traumatized over and over again in, literature shows, if someone has one trauma, they're much more likely to recover from it. But if there is trauma piled on top of trauma, it is far more difficult to kind of integrate that in a meaningful way so that somebody can kind of move forward in a typical fashion. And so we see Anna, who obviously has probably had trauma in her life, but she's able to either integrate that or compartmentalize, deal with it in a way that she can look at the world in a more typical manner, whereas Lucy has a singular focus. And that focus has been since she was young. She wouldn't tell the doctors who did this, right? She would kind of hide that fact. And it was alluded to, perhaps, Robin, maybe you can expand upon that she was keeping that secret so that she could one day go and exact her revenge.
Yes. Correct. And then she kept the photograph of the newspaper article when she saw it. Remember, there was a newspaper article with a picture of the family that she recalled based on her memory of what she witnessed with the mother. Are the listeners aware of the plot and aware of the events that take place in chronological order? Do you guys want to talk about that, or?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Because I think the opening scene of this film is so iconic, especially in terms of like French extremity and whatnot. I can't think of another film in that kind of subgenre that is just so impactful.
Now, guys, I don't know anything about horror movies, but I know about looking at computers all day and the headache it gives me because you may not know this, but the blue light coming off of those screens. 5 years ago, Felix Gray realized our eyes weren't meant to look at screens all day and designed glasses to make daily screen time more comfortable and the workday more productive. Felix Gray lenses filter 15 times more blue light that can make screen time tough on eyes and disruptive to sleep. I have ordered the Roebling in Sazerac Crystal, and I've been wearing them since they came in. I use them all day. I'm in front of a computer just about all waking hours for work, for podcasting, and just for scrolling through my phone before bed. Felix Gray offers classic frame styles made from acetate and hand finished for a durable, lightweight, and really comfortable pair of glasses. I forget I'm wearing glasses throughout the day and walk away from my computer and keep them on. Blue light lenses come standard starting at just $95, or you can even add your prescription at checkout starting at $145. Those of you who buy prescription glasses know that is an incredible deal. Now, if you can feel your screen time, or if you're not sure if blue light glasses are right for you, start with the best in blue light. Try Felix Gray. With their 30-day money-back guarantee, there's nothing to lose but eye strain. So right now, get 15% off the entire Felix Gray site when you enter promo code CHEERS at checkout, now through May 2nd. Go to felixgrayglasses.com/TP for the best blue light glasses on the market. That's FELIXGRAY glasses.com/TP and use promo code CHEERS at checkout for 15% off the entire site. That's free shipping, free returns, free exchanges. FelixGrayGlasses.com/TP.
But do you mind? I want to know how you guys saw the movie, because it's not exactly like a Hollywood blockbuster. You know what I mean? That everyone, I know, Brett, you were recommended, but Jules, how did you come across Martyrs?
Okay, so I love foreign horror movies. I don't know. I think there's a depth to foreign horror movies that there often isn't seen in American horror movies. And, no shade, there's some amazing American horror movies out there, but I really, really love foreign horror. And so I was looking at a list and it was like, the top 10 best foreign horror movies, and Martyrs was on there. And it was several years ago that I watched it. And it was one of those ones that at the time I was so horrified. But when I walked away from it, I continued to think about it for days, weeks, months after. And I mean, it's been years since I've seen it last, and I still think about it. It just had a profound effect on me. Just, what human beings will subject each other to in their quest for enlightenment or their quest for whatever, just the exploitation of others, and also just our deep human spiritual need to pierce the veil, to understand what lies beyond, right? And I think it is innate in all human beings. It is something that's part of us. We all die. It's something that we all have in common, something that we all share. So whether or not you're religious, whether you're an atheist, you're agnostic, I think part of us will always have that curiosity that's almost like unquenchable until we, meet our maker, whatever lies beyond that veil. Until we have those answers, we're forever going to do whatever it is in order to get those answers. And I think that's where you see this, whether or not you want to describe these people as a cult, an organization, some kind of conglomerate, a group of the 1% who've decided that they want to understand, or you look at them like Heaven's Gate or something like that. They're a group that wants the answers and feels as though the vehicle in which they're going to get those answers is through the martyring of somebody else, which almost seems problematic because you're martyring them for your beliefs, not necessarily their beliefs, which I always found really interesting.
No, that's really great. Absolutely. It's a lot to unpack in one sitting, I think. When I had my horror podcast, someone actually recommended it to me. I actually tweeted, and the tweet is still there, like 12 years later. Can you guys recommend a movie? And some random person was like, you should check out Martyrs. I was like, okay. So I bought it, took it home, just thought it was going to be another cheesy film, sat down, and I could not speak for hours after. I mean, it was just like complete shell shock. And no other film has forced such a visceral reaction. I mean, you really go inside your head after trying to comprehend and think of all the nuances and themes. And I mean, it's a lot. So yeah, but I think the film starts out with, you see a young girl with a shaved head running down the street screaming. I mean, immediately you're sucked into it. Like, you know, you're invested. What is going on here? And then it pivots to an orphanage, and you see two young girls. One's name is Anna, one's name is Lucy. They're best friends. And then it starts out to, at your point, at first you think it may be a supernatural film, because, you know, there's a monster in the room and it seems to attack her, and it's, you know, the boogeyman type of thing. And then it continues from there and fast forwards to the present, where the girls are now in their early 20s, and they are descending upon this home, and all hell breaks loose. I mean, literally all hell breaks loose. And the home scene, which is where we meet the Belfond family, is, I think that to me was kind of the most telling part of the entire film as far as the themes, because it's a family, a nuclear family, a husband, a wife. They're all white, eating breakfast, carrying on normal chit chat. The door opens and their lives are ruined. I mean, Lucy exacts her full revenge. And I think that's the most iconic scene from the entire film for most people, is Lucy, them opening the door and she's standing there with a shotgun. And I mean, it's pretty brutal.
Brett?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that scene, I had no idea what to expect from this movie. I didn't read anything about this movie, nothing. I came in completely cold. And it is interesting because you have that first scene where the young girl is running from the factory. Then there's almost a little bit of found footage type introduction where we have somebody who's doing an investigation. You don't really know what this is going to be. And then you have the young girls. And then all of a sudden, like Julie says, we move forward. And I think it tells you how far we move forward. But we move forward in time, and you have this family. You have no idea who these people are, but they seem perfectly normal, right? I mean, perfectly normal family with perfectly normal problems. And then she shows up and starts shooting people. And my first thought was that she was crazy, obviously. I wondered if it was going to be like a Memento thing where she keeps seeing the people who tortured her in other people. And I feel like the movie kind of lets you think that for a while. I mean, for a while you think, you know, she has killed these innocent people. She's so broken that she's murdered these innocent people. She's seeing monsters everywhere, not only in her mind, but in other people. And like I said, it's almost like two movies, because you could have stopped it at the end of like movie number one, right? And I don't know, I guess we're, you know, spoiler alert, if you're listening to this, you probably shouldn't if you haven't seen the movie. But the point where she kills herself, you could almost stop the movie then and you have a brilliant movie. Right? I mean, you don't have to go any further. You got a brilliant movie with all kinds of great themes you could talk about for forever. And then you have that twist where Anna realizes, you know, this truth that she didn't know. And I want to talk about when she discovers the other lady, and going back to our first point about torture porn. One of the things that really distinguishes this, if it were torture porn, when she found that lady, there would have been a jump scare. The lady would have attacked her. Something like that would have happened, right? That's what would have happened. But instead, it's like this moment of human decency where this person who has been deprived of, you know, basic human contact for so long, or love or kindness or anything, gets it. And it's sort of a beautiful scene, even as difficult as the visuals are to look at.
I agree. I think it's that moment of like that juxtaposition between the brutality that those individuals would have subjected that woman to, but then the tenderness of Anna, where she takes this woman who's in this state where it's terrifying to look at, right? And she helps her. She puts her into the bath. She holds her hand. There's those moments where this woman's terrified and she's, you know, clasping her hand. And I think it is quite beautiful and it is very tender. It's almost this nurturing moment amongst just this violence and this brutality. And it brings you back to the humanity of it all, where, you know, you're questioning humanity at some points in this. And then Anna goes and she does that. And it is really beautiful.
I think that moment for me like you just said, Jules, the juxtaposition between the brutality and the audience expecting more brutality, more torture, more. I mean, there are multiple scenes of gore up until this point, and then you see the woman who has all of this metal cap that's screwed into her head. She has ungodly amounts of scarring all over her body, and just the mere Anna reaching out and taking her hand, I think proves that unexpected acts of tenderness, especially in a film like this, can be just as viscerally affecting as torture, as watching someone get tortured, watching someone get harmed. Because that moment with the soundtrack kicking in, kind of like the low piano music, and then Anna taking her hand, I mean, that was so impactful. But yeah, for me, that was just one of the most impactful scenes of the entire film. And at that moment is where I almost like came to tears. I mean, it's just, we were witnessing so much carnage. Lucy's death was just devastating. Also, after they killed the entire family and Anna is still in caretaker mode, she's in love with Lucy. It's unrequited, which I find that a lot of people don't talk about, in terms of this movie, is that Anna, I'm sure you're aware of it, Jules, the martyrdom complex. Which Anna clearly probably has. And she wants to save that little bird with the broken wing. And a lot of times, romantic feelings kind of like pop up in times like that, I've read. So Anna tries to kiss Lucy and Lucy's like, WTF, and pushes her away. I mean, it's kind of like not the time. You know what I mean? They're sitting in a pool of dead bodies.
Yeah. But I'm sure Anna's thinking like, I helped you bury the bodies, like literally type thing. At any moment, if there's going to be, this love reciprocated, I do think that kind of underscores this relationship, like going back to her martyrdom complex and this, baby bird that she wants to fix this broken wing. You see Lucy at the orphanage, when you see Anna, who obviously they both endured their own trauma, as we see by this phone call later with Anna and her mother. But, she obviously had a complicated relationship with her mother. Her mother wasn't there for her, but the trauma was very different to Lucy's. And you see at the orphanage, Lucy basically pushes away everybody, but somehow there's like a crack in the veneer and Anna finds a way to get in. And at every moment when she's little, she, invites Lucy into her bed. And obviously they're little girls. It's not a sexual thing, but it's a closeness thing. She's trying to provide comfort. And in those moments, like when Lucy's in that bathtub and she's self-harming and she said, it wasn't me. Anna's always there to provide that comfort. And she never says to her, you're crazy. There wasn't something else. You did this to yourself. She's just there to be this source of support for Lucy. And I think the friendship that she offers is really beautiful.
Yeah. And they actually, just more proof that this is the most amazing movie ever made, is because every single scene, every single word in this film is relevant. There's no filler in this film whatsoever. I mean, every single word. So even from the beginning, when you see them as children in the orphanage, the doctors are like, they ask Anna questions about Lucy because that's her best friend. It really puts Anna in the caretaking role from the very, very beginning, and it shows the strength of their friendship. And then apparently, unrequited feelings of love too, of romantic love.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's not even talked about, is like how this is sort of a love story, but it is kind of a one-sided love story in that, are you going to do this? Are you going to be there in this capacity for somebody who's just a friend? You would have to love somebody very deeply, maybe as a friend, but I think it's very evident that Anna is in love with Lucy, warts and all, because she knows just how damaged Lucy is from this trauma. And it's almost irreparable in that nothing has been able to address this in any kind of way that has helped Lucy move past the trauma. She's very much stuck as that little girl who was stuck to that chair. Mm-hmm. She's trapped in that moment and she's unable to escape. And then that moment, she doesn't find escape until she, like Brett had addressed earlier, that scene where she ends her life, where it is iconic, right? It's like she just lived and survived past that point to quiet the voices in her head, which was the woman that she left behind, by exacting her revenge.
No, absolutely. And I think for me, at least in my interpretation of this film, I think guilt is probably one of the main themes of this. And like later, as we talk about historic themes, I intend to touch upon like French guilt after World War II, especially. I don't even know if Pascal Laugier has mentioned that in particular, but there are a lot of similarities between Martyrs and other French horror films at the time too. So I'd like to touch on that later. But yeah, it's a really impactful moment. This film has, like, in my eyes, 3 acts. You have the beginning, like the orphanage, the supernatural aspect. You have the home invasion aspect. Well, actually 4 acts. And then you have Anna discovering the basement torture dungeon. And then you have the end, as far as the society, I believe, is how they're credited in the film. Yeah, it's a really impactful moment. And the big twist of, because we see the monster, we see the manifestation of Lucy's guilt and trauma, in particular guilt, because it's the woman that she was unable to save when she was a little girl. She left because she escaped, and the woman was tied to a chair and chained to a chair in a factory. So she couldn't get her as a little girl. So that moment that the camera switches and we see that it's Lucy actually banging her head into the wall and harming herself and cutting herself. And that was a really strong moment too, I think, for viewers. And the imagery in this film as a whole is just, it's perfectly shot. The cinematography is beautiful. When Lucy takes her own life, she takes a piece of glass, she jumps through a window, takes a piece of glass and slits her own throat. And everything goes into slow-mo. There's rain. I mean, it's just so beautiful. And it's so fitting. And, like, almost at that time, after you witness and realize that she endured what she did, it's almost like a sweet release. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It is some of the most beautiful imagery. It's because some of it is so shocking and brutal, but it isn't without its reasons. There's always, I think Pascal Laugier always has a purpose for the brutality. And I think anybody who comes in, who's experienced any kind of trauma in their life, and I think the reality is a lot of human beings have, a lot of us are flawed. A lot of us have experienced really terrible things in our lives. So there's almost these cathartic release moments, I feel like, with regards to Lucy. Like, the moment when, whether or not you cast judgment on her in the beginning, when she blows these people away, one thing I was really interested in your take on was, okay, so Lucy comes in, she blows away dad, blows away mom, and then she goes to the son, right? And when she asks him, basically, did you know? Do you think that the son knew?
I think that he did know. And that's part of the reason why I kind of examined this film through the lens of French guilt after World War II. And I actually have a little, like, outline, not to get too, like, academic and boring on people, like, as far as a little, like, you have to know a little bit of French history, I would say, to fully kind of understand the scope of that. But long story short, Germany invaded France and took over. They made an armistice with the French government that France would be able to rule the lower half and Germany would basically take control of the top half. So France's government, basically those who were anti-German, anti-Nazis, fled to Britain, where they started to create their own little government. And then the collaborators, the Vichy government, took control in France. They actually were basically Hitler's puppet government in France. Over 20,000 French Jews were exterminated at the hand of Frenchmen. They did horrible things. They forced women into prostitution. They, again, rounded up, like, the Romani people with disabilities, homosexuals. They did the same thing that happened in Hitler's Germany. And it was French people who did it to their own people. So after World War II, and then Charles de Gaulle came in and, briefly and transitioned the government, and then they became back to democracy and an ally. There was an ungodly amount of guilt in France at the time. It was neighbor against neighbor, Nazi versus non-Nazi. So let's fast forward to 2020, right? Like, half of France still doesn't take responsibility for their participation and collaboration in the Holocaust. You have figures like Marine Le Pen, who is batshit insane, and she is a literal Nazi, who says, well, that was just a small group of people and they just don't recognize it. So my interpretation, as far as how Martyrs relates into that, with that scene that you're referring to, is the same thing that happened in Germany. With the older people, were you aware that was happening? Yes. Were your children, were people of further generations aware of it? They don't want to admit it. They just don't want to admit it. It's kind of this, like, guilt thing that's just hanging over generations, like this dirty secret that has just kind of smudged future generations. And when she asked, did you know? And I think his name was Etienne, I was like, no, I feel like he did. I mean, the entrance to the torture dungeon was behind your television, sir. Like, you had to have seen people come up and down out of your television. So
yeah. I feel like I feel like that look in his eye. It was almost like that pleading look. It wasn't a confused look. It was like, oh shit, she knows.
Yeah, exactly. And my dissertation too, this is kind of the lens that I analyze Martyrs through. And there's so countless examples of it literally being about French guilt and just how shitty people can be. Like, just how low as a person in society can you go to harm your fellow man? You know what I mean? So, and I think that Pascal Laugier he just drops instance after instance after instance of how horrible humanity can be.
Yeah, I think if you were to reduce this film to like 3 words, I think it would be like guilt, exploitation, and transcendence.
Yes. Yeah. And so, I think that the son did know. I think that was a brilliant scene too, because, as viewers, we're like, why are you killing the kids? Because she kills the son, like the 21-year-old son, and then she kills the 13-year-old girl, his sister.
Well, I think she knows basically what happened at the hands of her mother. So yes, this might be this innocent babe now, but as she grows up, she's inevitably going to be like the other members of her family. So I guess she assumes this is going to be a foregone conclusion, that this individual can't be saved. She's, fruit of the poisonous tree. So therefore she too must be exterminated.
Exactly. And I think the casting, we do need to touch on the casting too, because both Anna and Lucy are women of color. I believe Morgana Alawi is the actress who plays Anna. I believe she's Moroccan, which is really kind of interesting considering, French colonization and everything in Algeria and in Morocco. And the 2 leads are women of color. And then we can get to the very end with the final act and how that ties in. But yeah, it's just, I've never seen a more cohesive film, like, in my entire life. But I think it's really interesting. A lot of my friends who have shown this movie, well, first I have to bitch for a second, because I was really excited and I showed this film to a friend and she said the movie wasn't bad, but she couldn't take it seriously because the hammer dropped, if you recall, off the TV center. And that's actually what carried the plot, like, as a plot device, to have Anna discover the basement. And she said that ruined it all, but she couldn't. Really? She was dumb.
I mean, I think you have to have something. Like, what is going to be that one thing that is going to lead her into this other dimension, this complete other world, right? Where you think it's the one thing that, it basically separates that 2 acts very, very literally. She's walking from one act into another, walking from one world into another. And that hammer needs to separate it. She's on the phone with her mother. She's having this call. Obviously, Anna's in her own trauma, having so many feelings. They've been at this house for, I have no idea how long at this point, right? Like, do you have any idea how long it's been?
It hasn't been like day 2. So they were there for a day. They came in like a morning, I believe. Yeah, when they were eating breakfast, killed them, moved them. It rained at night. And I believe that she killed herself that evening on the first night.
It's so bizarre, right? Like, they're just weirdly comfortable in this house of horrors. And I get the objective is to clean it all up, but there just doesn't seem to be this desire to kind of go at a faster pace. It seems strange. It's like part of something is keeping them there, yet something is pushing them out. But I don't know, it feels odd and uncomfortable because you so much as the viewer just want them to get in that car and drive away.
Yes. And Anna decides to cuddle with Lucy's dead body, take a nap on the couch. And then the hammer falls. She calls her mom. That call, as you said, did not go very well. Clearly a toxic relationship. And then the hammer falls. And then she finds that in the entertainment center, there is a ladder that goes down below. And so Anna, the last thing I would do is be like, let me check this out. But I digress. But that's what Anna does. She goes down the freaking ladder. And that is where she sees pictures of torture victims along the wall and no context at this point. And then she finds the woman that you mentioned in the beginning. And it's horrific.
It's so horrific. Like, now, not only does poor Anna, she comes upon this scene, basically, this woman that she loves, unrequited love. She calls her on the payphone. Hey, like, Anna, found them. Yeah, it was them. And basically blew them all away. She shows up. This happens. Then Lucy's going through all this trauma. Then Lucy, the woman that she loves, kills herself. And let's just for a moment talk about Anna taking Lucy's body inside this basically murder house and then cleaning her. What were your thoughts on that scene?
I think there's a lot of like religious connotations there, which I haven't quite unpacked other than the surface meaning. I haven't quite actually unpacked that in terms of this film. So I'd be interested in hearing your perspective, but yet another act of tenderness from Anna, you know, showing love, caretaker and so forth. But yeah, what did you think of that?
It felt like there was a level of tenderness. I think there was some guilt in the fact that she couldn't save Lucy. And so part of her is trying to preserve and save her, even though I think her logical mind knows she's transcended this realm, whatever that means. Lucy is no longer with us, but there's almost this, not even, it feels like there's a religious aspect in the preservation of the body, but it almost feels like the way she does it and the way she cuddles the body, that there's almost the hope that I'm going to put back together this broken wing again, in like a literal sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's very, very tender. The character development on Anna is just absolutely incredible. And I think it's also very important to note that Anna was not even sure if she believed Lucy for like the entire like first third of the film up until they reached the house. She's like, are you sure it's them? Are you sure? You can tell she was just like completely unsure as to whether Lucy was just severely mentally ill or did actually endure that trauma. So when she walked in, you know, she was still trying to like, it's okay, Lucy, it's okay. It's all gone. It's all gone. Like she just couldn't fathom the level of trauma that Lucy had. And so I think when she made it into the murder basement, she realized, oh shit, like this was real. Like this actually happened.
That moment when you hear the death rattle, like that from the woman, from the mother, from the one who put Lucy through all of this trauma, right? You hear that death rattle, she's alive. And Anna makes that choice to try to get her to the woods. And then Lucy sees that. And there's that like deep sense of betrayal. Like Lucy is like, you didn't believe me. You know what I mean? This whole time you said you believed me. And then you went and helped this woman who put me through all of this. And like Brett had addressed earlier, there's that moment where you wonder, will Lucy become unhinged and kill Anna, the one person that has loved her this entire time?
Yeah, she was flipping over furniture and smacked her around a couple of times. Like, I can't imagine that level of betrayal. I mean, they're literally there in a sea of dead bodies. Lucy is hallucinating horribly, manifesting her own traumas into what looks like a monster, a creature, which, side note, I don't know if you've seen the making of, but that creature was actually really cool. It was a suit that zipped up the back and they smeared Vaseline all over it. It was a red suit. Yeah, weird. It was really cool. It was cool though. But that moment, I mean, it was, and the acting is phenomenal. I mean, every ounce of emoting in this film is just, I've never seen better performances in a horror film, hands down. Like it's never happened to me, you know, for me at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really, really sad.
It was. I can't think of another horror film. Like when we spoke about this earlier and we're talking about discussing it, it's got to be my favorite horror film. Like I was thinking about it after, trying to go through all my favorites, trying to think of one that has better performances or one that I think is equally profound. And I had a pretty hard time. I mean, yeah, there's lots that I love. Like I love The Orphanage. I love Let the Right One In. There's plenty that I really, really like. But I think this one probably takes the cake because it has this way of just really sticking with you. And it's upsetting and it's beautiful. And it's very existential in that it makes you question why we're here, why we're doing anything. And I think when a movie is capable of doing that, and to bring it back to what you said, Pascal Laugier is only able to do this because the performances from the actors are so profound and they are so capable of emoting like such an extreme range of emotions and such depth with very few words. Like there are not that many words spoken in this film. I think, yeah, there is talking, but I do think there's a lot of silence used
very effectively. And also to your point about horror in general, you know, horror, and here I'm just going to give my usual spiel on horror. I am not a fan. Horror gets a really bad rap because I think especially the 80s when it came out, you know, like Jason, the boobs and the gore, the boobs and the blood is what like most mainstream society believes horror to be. Is that the case? Sure. But now we have James Wan pulling out every damn jump scare over and over and over and over and over again. And the formula seems to be, let's have a lot of silence and then we'll just crank up the volume in a jump scare, and they force you to turn your volume up. Like the dialogue and everything's very low, jump scare is very loud. That's kind of like how modern horror has been. Horror is the best vessel for socio-political commentary, hands down. Like hands down. I actually did another for the same class, believe it or not. Something about me is just not right, but I did another study basically about horror and French horror in particular, as far as socio-political messaging. And I mean, you have everything from capitalism, consumerism, like women's rights, male gaze, patriarchy. I mean, you have all of that in horror. I mean, even like Night of the Living Dead, and we can go back to even some classics, but like horror is political, horror is political. And I find that Pascal Laugier and this singular film was able to touch on just every aspect. I mean, humanity as a whole. I mean, it even transcends just, capitalism or consumerism. It goes to, guilt, like post-war guilt, religion, just humanity in general, existentialism. I mean, it's just, and it's so nihilistic, which is what I absolutely love. And to your other point, tying that up, I've always said that Martyrs has no catharsis whatsoever, but you're right. We get little glimpses of it like along the way.
Yeah.
And that's what I actually hate about American horror is that we have to have the happy endings tied up with a bow. We have to have that complete experience. And why I love French, especially films so much, is that 9 times out of 10, you don't get that. You get the human experience.
Yeah, and I think it's more profound because I think it's more of an experience. Whereas watching most American horror movies, and to me, there are some exceptions. Like I really liked Ari Aster's movies as of late. Like I really liked Midsummer and Hereditary. I thought Midsummer made me really, really think after the fact. And for me, it's more rare with American horror. But I do think that French extremism in particular, they have a way of capturing all of those socio-political messages in a way that American films don't, because there's this need to placate the viewer, I think, with American horror. Whereas I think French horror makes the movie for art's sake and as political commentary. Whereas I think, all horror movies do to a degree, but I think with French horror, there's more freedom in that there's a certain expectation that you're going to do that. Whereas in American horror, there's often, like you said, these certain tropes with boobs and gore. And like you said, like the James Wan jump scare, which we see the Saw movies over and over and over and over again. Yep. We see the same thing and it's very formulaic and nothing really shocks us. And there is nothing deeper. Like oftentimes they'll try to give you this sense of depth, like with the Saw movies, with Jigsaw and somebody trying to find the profound meaning in life through suffering. But I feel like it's sort of a shallow version of that, like a weak attempt. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, no, I totally do. And a funny story. So in my horror podcast that I had, I interviewed a lot of different horror actresses and actors like Heather Langenkamp from Nightmare on Elm Street, like a bunch of different people. One of my favorite interviews was I interviewed Eli Roth and Scott Spiegel of the Hostel franchise. And I had read online at that point, oh no, it's totally socio-political commentary about X, Y, and Z and da-da-da-da-da. So I get them on there and I ask them about it, well, here's the theory. And Scott actually said, fuck, we just wanted to make a cool movie with lots of blood. So I was like, all right. So he's like, I don't know where people are getting this. We just wanted to go as hard as we could. So, I mean, that was kind of like, oh.
What? Way to subvert my expectations, guys. I was hoping that you were going to say something profound, but we just wanted to make a cool movie. Like, what?
Yeah, that was it. They just wanted to have you push the boundaries as much as possible, which I mean, it did. Hostel did. The American side of things. I mean, obviously the French and the Japanese and Koreans have been doing subversive, transgressive cinema for far longer than we have. I mean, I don't even think it's really hit us yet.
Guys, I've got to tell you, I've been off of my shaving game for the winter, but with the warmer weather and summer right around the corner, I can't wait to get back into my regular routine. That first shave after letting your hair grow for a while is always so satisfying. And it's just true. I've been to the pool several times now with the temperatures reaching 90 degrees where I am, and I can't get away with not shaving. It's important that I shave with the right razor that won't irritate my skin. And I need a razor that makes shaving uncomplicated, that's gentle on my skin, leaving it moisturized, super smooth, and bump-free. And the Athena Club razor is hands down the best razor I've ever used. Athena Club's razor has thousands of 5-star reviews and is designed with built-in skin guards and an innovative handle to help prevent razor burn while being gentle on curves. So Athena Club also has the dreamiest shave foam that's back in stock. That paired with the Athena Club razor and shave foam will leave your skin soft, hydrated, and smooth. Now here's the best part. The razor kit's only $9 and comes with your choice of handle color, an extra blade, and a magnetic hook for easy shower storage. So, show your skin you care with the Athena Club razor kit. Sign up today and you'll get 20% off your first order. Just go to athenaclub.com and use promo code OWLS. That's ATHENACLUB.com with promo code OWLS for 20% off. athenaclub.com.
Yeah, Brett, are you a connoisseur of horror?
I love horror. Yeah, I watch horror all the time.
Cool. So like, I guess my point to Jules too was that, horror is a great vessel for sociopolitical commentary, and we've seen it throughout history. Like in the 50s, the Cold War, you had the monsters and the aliens, and then in the 60s, you have the psychopath killers. The 70s was like attacking the nuclear family, like Michael Myers and stalking people.
Zombies with consumerism.
The 80s, I wish, would just fall off the map entirely.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So what's your favorite?
My favorite horror movie, or my favorite genre, or my favorite socio-political take on horror?
Socio-political take on horror.
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, I love horror because of what you just said. The fact that whatever's happening, you can sort of channel that through horror, and it makes it easier to deal with. In the wake of September 11th, you had a lot of amazing horror, and it's sort of interesting. Even in the zombie genre, we talked about it's consumerism, right? Well, that's what it was in the 60s and 70s and 80s, was sort of the slow-moving zombies. And then you have September 11th, and you have a sort of resurgence of zombie movies, but now they're fast zombies, right? They're much more threatening. It's not this slow, creeping destruction like it was maybe when you think of consumerism consuming us all. It was a much more sort of visceral thing. I mean, I do think one of the things about this movie I thought was really interesting, the whole, like, are we the baddies thing? You guys seen that meme? It's like the Nazi guys asking the other Nazi, are we the baddies? It's like the first time he realized, are we the bad guys? Right? And I thought it was interesting because the bad guys, quote unquote bad guys in Martyrs, who are obviously bad guys, are totally righteous in their cause, right? I mean, they absolutely believe they're the good guys. And I just think that's a really interesting thing to remember, that nobody ever thinks they're the bad guys. Like the Nazis did not think they were the bad guys. They thought they were the righteous ones, right? I mean, whether it's like the Klan or, Maoist revolutionaries or, the Khmer Rouge, whoever it is, when they're slaughtering people, they're not thinking, haha, we're evil. They think we're trying to build a better thing or find a better thing or whatever. And I felt like that was really interesting, once again, why it's not torture porn. Because the people who were doing bad things were doing it for this righteous cause of knowledge, right? To understand. It's the only way we can understand what's beyond is to do this. And it's interesting because, you're watching it and obviously you think this is terrible, it's horrible what they're doing. But then right at the end, you're like, I'm really curious what she saw, right? Like you're kind of with the bad guys for a second because you're like, I want to know too. I want to see what she saw, right? And I thought that was a real sort of interesting and manipulation might be a strong word of the audience to sort of get the audience for very briefly and for just a very brief period of time to sort of join with the bad guys, wanting to know what the knowledge was that they gained from this.
I think God, like everybody believes, like when you're going into battle, that God is on our side. Like everybody says that, right? Can God be on everybody's side? I don't know what the answer is, but it's one of those things, what we will do to other people. And you're right. In that moment, you almost empathize. You don't empathize with what they've done in order to get where they are, but that deep human desire to know. You want to know what Anna saw. Like you want to know what she says to Madame, right? Like you want to know. Like I have that deep need to just be like, what did she whisper? why don't I know, and to see on her eye when it shows that light, and you really want to see, like, you just want to understand. And so you can just, for that brief moment, really get why these people are going to such great lengths and this sort of marriage of religion and science. They're doing so in almost this experimental capacity in this like sterile facility, in almost through like a scientific method, right? Where they're like, okay, well, this hasn't worked so far. Now we're going to try this approach. And they're doing it for religious reasons. So I find, this science for the sake of religion to be very, very compelling.
And I think too that, oh, go ahead, Brett.
I was just going to say, I just think that's just such a powerful warning to us all. I mean, whatever you're doing, do not let yourself decide that you can do anything you want because quote unquote God is on your side. I mean, I don't know. I just thought it was really powerful.
No, the ending is very powerful. And I think too that entire, plot there is also the underlying themes of it, right? So we have Anna and Lucy, who are two women of color. And I think that also it's about the society, the cult, as it were, the group who is doing this. They're all white. They're all older white people. And so I think that it's twofold, going back to the theme of like post-World War II guilt and everything. So when Madame shows up and, Anna's down in the torture dungeon, the torture basement, she has been caught. She is now chained downstairs in the basement. What we notice is that everyone's wearing a uniform. The same uniform. Everyone who comes down there is wearing the same thing. It's very Nazi-esque. You know what I mean? Like that entire thing. It's very Nazi-esque. You have like throughout this last several decades, any film about Nazi or Nazi science experiments has that same sterile clinical feel to it. They're all wearing uniforms. So that was very reminiscent of that to me, but moreover to like French imperialism and, how they colonized so many different places. And it really was white people committing ungodly acts, atrocities upon local people of color to further their own beliefs that they were righteous, they weren't heathens, they were cultured, they're good, And if you actually look in like Algeria, because French colonized Algeria, a lot of the retro old postcards from Algeria were actually like Algerian women, like women of color, brown women who were forced to shave their heads and like wear revealing French clothing. So it's just like the entire kind of like setup of it too is very reminiscent of post-World War II France. The liberation of Algeria happened in like 1952, I think, like 52 or 62. Sorry, I'm a little off on that, but that realm. So it just all tied in so well together. I mean, it's just so brilliant. You know what I mean? Just like aside from the religious aspect of it, like there's so much historical context. And when Madame shows up, which is like its own thing. I mean, it's shocking. Madame is like one of my favorite characters of any film, like ever, with those purple glasses. But like she starts opening the book and showing Anna, martyr. Every single one was a person of color, first of all. Every single one, if you go back and watch it. She even mentions a woman from France who was murdered because she slept with Nazis. So, I mean, there's just so many little like bits and pieces and elements of like post-World War II. But yeah, I found that really, really fascinating, I guess.
Yeah, the danger of the collective, where you do see those hints of, Nazism, where they're all stripped of their individuality, wearing these uniforms. They're all working towards this collective goal or this objective, which I think they all believe is quote unquote righteous, right? As Brett had mentioned. And you see Anna and we watch her being stripped of everything that makes her her. She's being broken, like her will is being broken. Her head is shaved. There's what they're doing to these women. There's almost like, it made me think of like what Dr. Mengele did, right? These experiments and these strange things that he did to these twin studies, all of these weird things and horrible, horrible atrocities that people were subjected to in the name of science or this deeper understanding. And the Nazis had this weird kind of mystical, I mean, Hitler was very mystical with all of his weird things. What was it? The Antarctica, where there was like that secret portal to wherever. And he had all of these interesting thoughts on that. And so you wonder how much of this was done for that purpose, to understand these things. I mean, I guess we'll never really know because we don't have, Mengele's handbooks where he's telling us exactly why he's doing what he's doing. Like, is he just a psychopath or a sadist that enjoys inflicting pain? I guess we just won't know. But with regards to this movie, it doesn't seem like there's that angle. Like what you said, when we see Madame come in, it's like this profound thing where I find it so strange where she speaks to Anna in almost like you'd speak to an equal, right? There is this frank explanation of what's going on. And I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I think she knew. I mean, Anna wasn't going to leave. I mean, I think that it was just so matter of fact and so blunt. Just, you're here now. You have no chance of escaping. None, like none whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And I think Madame knew that, and she was like trying to basically be matter of fact so that she would just accept it. And then what happens is Anna is literally tortured into transcending. And that, to me, I've lost friends over this film. I have lost friends actually over this film. We're like, goodbye, don't ever call me again. Because they think that you watch Anna get beaten and worn down for 35 minutes. Like, I've counted it. It's 35 full minutes of Anna being beaten and fed like slop, green slop.
Yeah. When the first movie ends, I'm going to keep going back to that. I remember looking at how much time was left and being like, man, what are we going to do for the next 50 minutes? And yeah, that's what we do.
How did you guys feel like emotionally as you started watching that? Because it was so grueling for so many people. A lot of people liken it to Irreversible with the rape scene in Irreversible.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. Oh, well done, sir.
That scene, that incredibly long scene.
Yeah, I don't know. I found it to be at first, okay, so we see the example of Lucy where she's haunted by the woman that she left behind. That is what she sees through her trauma. And then Madame speaks of the other woman who saw the one with the metal thing that was fixed to her head, the quote unquote creature. She saw cockroaches crawling all over her. And then we see what Anna sees. She doesn't have visual hallucinations insofar as we could tell. She has auditory ones. And what does she hear? She hears Lucy. She hears that person that she loved. So insofar as we know, it's a positive thing. And what does Anna do? Lucy tells her basically to just not resist anymore, to just surrender to the process. And when she does that, I think that is what separates Anna from all of those other people. There is like, she's forced to do a lot of things with those beatings, but she eventually, you see that moment where like, boom, she accepts it. She surrenders. She all of a sudden starts taking the slop. She starts doing it and she just goes with the process. And I think it's really powerful because I think there's a lot of fighting right up until the end with that other woman and probably with everyone else they tried to martyr. And that's why Anna becomes a martyr, because it also becomes something that she surrenders to. It becomes that choice, whereas nobody else made the choice to surrender. So what is then their cause becomes sort of hers. It happens in a way that she's initially forced into that position, but she does surrender, and that's when she almost reaches, I guess, enlightenment or transcendence.
And can we talk about that scene of when she reaches enlightenment? Because to me, that was one of the most impactful scenes of like any movie that I've ever seen. And I think that speaks volumes to Pascal Laugier. I mean, he was able to directly shift, right, from 35 whole minutes of just mind-boggling torture of watching this woman who's had the best character development of like all time, right? Of the caretaker, like the lover, just an amazing, just saint-like figure. And then transition right to brutality for 35 minutes. And then to this just really quiet, brief, like almost romantic interlude where she starts thinking of Lucy. And that was just so incredibly moving to me. Like, I actually think I had tears in my eyes the first time I watched it. I mean, it was just so impactful.
Brett?
It's difficult to describe how hard that must have been, because it would be very easy, given how long we've been watching this torture, to basically just lose it. You know, just lose the thread, lose the story, never be able to recover from that. Whatever you do after that's going to be, you know, it's either going to seem cliche or whatever. I mean, you guys have seen the American version. I can only imagine how the American version handles this. I've not seen the American version.
Don't, like, do everyone a favor and just don't.
But, you know, I'm trying to imagine, like, what would the American version, she'd be tortured for a long time. She'd hear Lucy's voice and she would somehow fight back and escape, right? Like, that's what would happen in the American version. And I think this also speaks to sort of the distinction between the French sort of view on this and the American view. I think American movies, or Americans maybe in general, maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but I think we always want things to work out in the end. I think there's this sort of like deeply sort of American sense that things are always going to work out in the end, no matter how bad they are. Something's going to happen to fix it. You know what I mean? And I just feel like the French don't feel that way. And so, as with many French films, frankly, that I've seen, horror films in particular, there's no salvation at the end. You know, I mean, to the extent Anna finds release, it's not physical release. It's like Julie said, it's accepting sort of the inevitability of her suffering, that there's nothing she can do about it. It doesn't mean it's right, you know, but there's nothing she can do about it. So she accepts it and just moves forward, which maybe is, like I said, a dark metaphor for life in general, but that's what she does. And because she does that, she's able to sort of see this, you know, reach this level of transcendence or whatnot.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing. Like it's so weird that you said that, because when you cut out for that moment, that's what Robin and I were basically talking about, how there's this almost like nihilistic bent to French horror movies where they don't feel the need to put a bow on it. They don't feel the need to kind of reconcile that desire to make you believe everything's going to be okay, because that isn't life. And so there's so much more of an experience in watching French films, or ones where you're left going, what just happened right now? Like, what happened? Why did it end like this? And you walk away and you think about it, and you can't help yourself. And for the days, weeks, hours, whatever, it's constantly on your mind. And because there is no resolution, there is no conclusion. It's like this sort of unsolved thing, and it's open to interpretation. And that's what I think makes it infuriating and beautiful, and like such great art at the same time.
Yeah, and I think this notion of the suffering is necessary. There's so much going on here, right? I mean, as you guys, I'm sure, have talked about, this notion that the suffering is necessary for the transcendence. And these other people they're trying to skip that. They want to do a shortcut. They want to see the transcendence. They want to understand it without suffering first. And what I see in it, it's almost like a Lovecraftian ending, like you look into the chaotic abyss at the center of all things, and it drives you crazy. And so Madame, or Mademoiselle, or whatever her name is, when she hears what Anna has seen, her mind is not prepared for that, because she didn't suffer. And you can't take that thing. And it just broke her. That's sort of how I viewed it. It broke her. It broke her mind. And the only release from the sort of insanity that was spiraling around her was death. And so that's why she kills herself in the end.
I wasn't sure. Like, I still don't know if she killed herself for that reason, or if she killed herself to basically spare the rest of them. Because whatever she had said, whatever Anna had whispered to her was too great a truth, was that hidden knowledge that shouldn't be known, too profound. And to share that knowledge without suffering with the group would remove the purpose for living. You know what I mean? Like, why do we exist? That whole existential bent on this movie. You know, why are we here? What is the purpose? And that knowledge that could have been revealed to Madame, I guess, could have been twofold, right? It could have been enough that she was like, oh, that was just too much and I can't go on living, or I need to end my life so as to save the lives of everyone else. Because she says something to that guy on the other side of the door, and she says, keep on doubting. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really powerful, because in doubting, we've got a reason to go on, right? Like, when you absolutely know there's something better on the other side, what's to stop you from ending your life to go there? Right? You know it's better, you know it's the ultimate. But when we've got that shred of doubt in our minds, I think it keeps us trying to just be the best versions of ourselves and to do better, because maybe there's salvation, maybe there's not, but it's something to work towards. But having those absolute answers, I think, is too much for human beings. It's like knowing the day you're going to die.
Mm-hmm. It was a brilliant ending. I certainly did not see that coming. And I'm always asked by friends that I show this film, because, guys, I whore this film out. I will put it on everyone. If there are strangers on the street, I'm like, have you seen Martin? No, I'm kidding. But like, it's borderline. Okay. But yeah, like, everyone asks me, well, what do you think Madame said? And I just, like, for some reason in my mind, I just can't even theorize about it, because I just don't even want to think about, I don't know. It's just, the film is just so close to my heart. I just can't imagine. I cannot imagine what she said to produce that outcome. I really can't. I mean, it could go literally, like you said, one of three ways, more or less.
I mean, she could have like retained that little bit of autonomy at that moment, even though she clearly saw something and did transcend. She could have in a moment. I mean, I don't think this is probably what he intended, but of course it's one interpretation that she basically said, I saw nothing, even though she did see something, but just in that last moment of revenge, knowing that she's been subjected and exploited to such atrocities, for these people to have this greater understanding and knowledge to at that last moment hold that back from them would also be really profound.
And for the listeners who haven't seen the film and wonder how she transcended, after being beaten and abused for an uncertain amount of time, for a long time, I mean, 35 minutes worth at least, okay, she is actually taken in, and it literally looks like a Nazi medical lab. She's taken into surgery and her skin is completely removed except for around her face. And then she is hoisted up on some sort of, what would you call that?
It's like it reminds me of that Leonardo da Vinci painting, like a wheel, right? Like that man on a wheel. I don't know what it is. What would you call it, Brett?
I don't know. A contraption.
On this like circular, contraption thingamajig.
Yeah, there you go.
And you see her, I mean, her muscles and tendons. I mean, it is brutal. It is brutal, guys. And then they turn a heat lamp on her, put the finger in just a little bit more, the thumb in the wound. And apparently she transcends and eventually dies. But do we know for a fact that she transcended? I mean, is it outside the realm of possibility for her to just be like, this is my one last act of, no, because it wouldn't fit her character narrative. Just kidding.
just kidding. But that's the thing with this movie is Pascal Laugier leaves it open for so many different outcomes where it is so open to interpretation. And I think one could choose to interpret it like that. Like, yeah, maybe it doesn't fit her character arc, but if that's the paradigm through which you're viewing the movie, you may interpret it as such. So I totally get that.
As an American, an unfortunate American, it's frustrating to have a movie this amazing and then you get to the end and it's keep doubting. And then Pascal Laugier decides to show us the definition of martyr, which is what? To bear witness.
To bear witness. Yeah.
So what do you guys make of that as it relates?
Brett, you go first.
Well, I mean, well, number one, I think I didn't really know that was the definition of martyr, right? Like this, when we're having this whole discussion about what it means, and when Mademoiselle shows up and then she's having a discussion, she's talking about some are victims and some are martyrs, right? And all these other girls have been victims, and we want a martyr. I thought a martyr in sort of the traditional sense that you think of it, just someone who dies for some cause greater than themselves, right? Is sort of what I was thinking. But this notion of being a witness, I mean, that's what Anna is at the end. And I think there's a couple deeper things that you could get out of that. You know, Anna has been a witness to a lot of things. She's been a witness to Lucy's suffering. She's been a witness to Lucy's revenge. She's been a witness to the fact that Lucy was correct. You know, she's been a witness to the evil that's beneath this society, and now she's been a witness to possibly the sort of greater thing that's beyond all things. So that's sort of what I got out of it. My thing, when they gave the definition, any doubt that I had, and maybe this was foolish of me, but any doubt that I had that she actually saw something kind of went away. I was like, okay, I got it. You know, that wasn't just like her brain firing weirdly. Like she was actually seeing something beyond.
I thought it was really powerful that he added that at the end because like you, Brett, I thought it was, you know, somebody who's like dying for their beliefs type thing. And I'm like, these are the beliefs of somebody else. How is she really being martyred for, you know, the society's beliefs? Yes, at some point she does surrender. She does make a choice to, you know, potentially transcend at the urging of Lucy or her auditory hallucination of Lucy, however one wants to view that. And yeah, to bear witness, you're right. She did bear witness to so many different things because we see Anna throughout the beginning at the orphanage. She's bearing witness to Lucy's trauma. She's seeing the self-harm. She's then coming into this chaotic scene. She's seeing this murder where Lucy's like, oh, found them. Yep, it was them. And I basically annihilated the whole family. So we see her bear witness to that as well. And then we see her find this quote unquote creature she's witnessing this impact of this violence, this trauma, and this person that's been subjected to unspeakable horrors. And she doesn't understand why at this point, right? But she's bearing witness. And then as she goes down and she sees this kind of chamber without, like Robin had mentioned earlier, without the context of what the photos mean. And then when Madame tells her, and then we see her go through her own process. And then when she really does bear witness to something profound, I think the fact that he puts that at the end there, it really kind of seals it. And it made it a lot more, it doesn't give you resolution, but it gives you some sort of sense of, okay, what I believed and the way that I interpreted this, that she did indeed see something through the veil on the other side, wasn't just her neurons firing. There was something there.
I completely agree.
See, because we're all just so smart. That's why we got that.
Oh, yes. We're so smart. What did we miss, Robin? We had to have missed something.
No, everything has been pretty full. I would also like to say, if you're ever like bored on the weekend, I recommend a back-to-back showing of Martyrs, and then followed up by Carl Dreyer's film, The Passion of Joan of Arc. It's a 1928 film. It is incredible. If you actually do a double feature of the two films together, you'll see so many similarities and just the overall themes. I mean, it's really good. So.
If you ever need recommendations for horror movies, Robin's your girl because she's got all the recommendations.
It's sad, but
well, I'll say this: as the newest person to see Martyrs, I don't know that I can say I recommend it unreservedly to anybody, because I'm sure there are certain people who would, as you said, they would never speak to me again if I did that. But I do think everything that happens in the movie, and this, to go back, just to repeat once again, this torture porn thing, everything that happens in the movie is necessary to the overarching themes and the message that we're trying to tell here. There's nothing, to me at least, extraneous. There's no torture for the purpose of torture. And that's when I think of torture porn, I think of that, there's nothing that happens just to, like Hostel. I really like Hostel. I really enjoyed Hostel. Thought it was a good movie. A lot of people hate it. But there's a lot of things that happen in Hostel that are just to make you squirm in your seat and to go, right? And then the even worse examples of torture porn, like Captivity might be a good example. And if you've ever seen Captivity, it's a terrible movie. Don't watch it. And everything in Captivity is just for the purpose of that. Right? Or like Human Centipede, like all these movies that came along around the same time that are just meant to gross you out. That's the only purpose. That is not this movie. There are some of the most disturbing, horrible scenes you can imagine happen in this movie, but they all happen for a reason. And if you can endure that, because it is endurance. I mean, this is not, those 35 minutes are not enjoyable in any sense of the word, but they are important. And if you can, if you have the stomach for it, I do think it's a tremendous movie. It really is. I mean, it's like, I was really I didn't know you guys loved it so much. I really building it up. I thought, I don't know about this, but I think it did live up to the hype, as it were.
I think that you put it really perfectly. If you can endure this, it's almost like you will find enlightenment through your suffering in watching this movie, right?
There you go.
Yeah. Right? It's one of those movies that I agree. I won't recommend it to everybody because it's a good way to lose friends and kind of alienate people. Not everybody can stomach Martyrs, but I do recommend it to a lot of people. And some people have said, what is this piece of trash? And I think when people are like, oh, this is just torture porn, I always have to remind people there is no sex in this movie. It's one of those things where most horror movies, we're used to seeing boobs for the sake of boobs. We're used to seeing either, especially in torture porn, a rape scene. We don't see that here. It is very clearly pointed out that with regards at the beginning to the torture of Lucy, that she wasn't raped, right? That is made very clear. And Anna at no point is raped. There's nothing sexual about it. The nudity that is shown it's meant to be horrific. it's not meant to be sexually gratifying in any way. Like a lot of horror movies are. People will watch them. It's very formulaic. You see somebody, you know, running down the stairs. The girls are shirt off. It's gore and boobs, gore and boobs. This is nudity for the sake of, you need to understand the trauma, right? It shows you, and like the whole muscle, when it's just her muscles there, there's something just about seeing that, yeah, nothing is without its purpose. There is no violence without purpose and no nudity without purpose. And there is so rare to have a horror movie without any sex. And this movie is unique, I think, for that reason. Can either of you think of any horror movies? I mean, I don't think like Inside has any sex in it, does it? Obviously, but that's a completely different movie. But this one, there's a lot of female nudity. There's males around, but yet there is no sex.
Right. There's no sexualization of women like in Martyrs whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I would also like, and I will die on this hill, I think that the term and concept of torture porn, I think it's uniquely American in a sense where anything that happens not for the sexual gratification of a male viewer is, oh, that's just pointless, you know, violence and gore. French film is, especially with the new wave of French extremity, we have what? Martyrs, Inside, Frontiers, High Tension is like the other big one, which is actually like my least favorite, side note. But then there's a film, and this is actually one of my favorite films, and it's from the 90s. You can only find it. It's called Baise-moi, which literally translates to rape me. And it was directed by two women. And every scene has nudity in it. It basically starts out where a woman is raped and she and this other woman go on the run and they start having sex with whoever they want to. They kill whoever they want to, rob men, so on and so forth. The sex is unsimulated. So the women were actually having filmed sex with male actors. It's very pornographic, but it's actually not done in a sexual way. It's just showing, you know, kind of like the storyline as it wraps up. And it's actually a very feminist film too. But I just think that Americans we get our knickers in a twist over, you know, any little act of violence whatsoever. I've seen Martyrs called torture porn. I mean, every film under the sun, I've seen someone rally behind that's torture porn. I think a Serbian film is one of the biggest ones. Like recently, of like recent years of its torture porn. And I have an episode coming out of where I defend a Serbian film and its socio-political context. But yeah, I'm just so tired of hearing torture porn. It's just thrown at anything these days. Anything.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how Martyrs, when somebody goes through the lens of not really understanding the greater depth of it, could just see it and look at it if you're not really paying attention and just think torture for torture's sake. But I just question whoever's watching that and has that interpretation, because there's really no sexualization of women. There is no sex. There's, you know, sure, there might be some boobs shown, but it's not in a sexual way. And it isn't for the sexual gratification of the viewer. It's done with an express purpose of illustrating this trauma and this violence and the impact of it. So when people say that, I feel like it's just a gross misrepresentation of this film and a misunderstanding of French extremity in general.
Well, I think we have such a puritanical view of cinema as a whole here anyway. You know, anytime breasts are shown in like an American film, for the most part, it's sexual. It's sexualized. You're sexualizing the woman. In French films, I mean, I lived in France for like almost 2 years, you know, like you see nudity everywhere and ads on billboards. Like it's just a part of normal everyday biological existence there. So, you know, in a lot of French films, you see nudity and it's not sexualized. It's kind of like the lens that other people from, you know, Western civilization give it, especially Americans, but it's not necessarily sexualized, if that makes sense.
Well, Europeans have a completely different viewpoint with regards to nudity. It is someone can be on film and be nude with another purpose than just to have sex. It's just a very different thing. In American film, it's very formulaic, right? Like if people are naked, they're going to be getting it on in a very short amount of time. And like, that's just how it happens. But in European films, it can be nudity for the sake of nudity to illustrate a certain point, and it isn't always sexualized.
In an American horror film, if someone is having sex, they are the next on the list.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. I mean, it's so formulaic and old.
Yeah. It's sort of like that movie I always think of. Have either of you seen It Follows?
Yes.
It's like, oh, you have sex. And like, it's next, it's just going to stalk you and kill you.
I know. I liked it too.
Yeah. See, I think that film was so brilliant for turning it on its, you know, all those groups on its side. Yeah.
I loved it. It's one of my favorite American horror movies probably in the last 10 years for sure.
Yeah, I recommend that one. Whenever anybody asks for a movie recommendation, that's one of the first ones I give them, as it follows. Because it's also scary. It's scary and it's like neat. So
I've read of it like being this whole like allegory on AIDS, but then I can't remember who the director was like, no, it's actually just sort of about growing up and kind of running away from the responsibilities and the sorts of things that, you know, adulting brings. And that resistance that we have, that kicking and screaming at, you know, the age of 17 or 18, you're basically having to leave the nest and you've got all of these things. And it's sort of like this impending, you know, reality. And I guess that's sort of what this stalking being that takes on these different manifestations is. But it's one of those movies that can be interpreted in so many different ways. All right. How should we sum this up, you guys?
go see Martyrs if you can handle it. Achieve transcendence.
Yes. Achieve enlightenment through your suffering. Watch Martyrs.
That is actually the very best thing I've ever, tie up advertisement for Martyrs. Should be in the trailer, Jules.
Yeah, there you go.